I started off as an intern in the control room there, and I was just drawn to the energy industry from a youth. It was 2008 where the first Iron Man movie came out, and I was watching that movie, and something in there just galvanized me to just be like, I really want to do this. Like, there's no other passion for me than just being in energy.
We're currently here in Chicago visiting my friend Amir Quadri, Advisor of Technology Innovation at MISO. Mr. Quadri is shaping the innovation landscape at a major independent system operator.
And those naysayers, changing them to say yes, it's about connecting to them, understanding their problems, and then just saying, we want to work with you and bring you along on this journey so you learn as well.
Welcome to the AI and Data Governance Podcast with Dr. Vega, where we explore the cutting-edge AI and data innovations shaping the future of the electric utility industry. Hey, maybe you will get to be your own Iron Man.
I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping for that one day.
Welcome to the AI and Data Governance Podcast with Dr. Vega, where we explore the cutting-edge AI and data innovations shaping the future of the electric utility industry. I am your host, Rolando Vega, and today we have an exceptionally special guest joining us. We're currently here in Chicago visiting my friend Amir Quadri, Advisor of Technology Innovation at MISO. Today we'll be discussing not only some of MISO's key accomplishments, but also gaining insight about and into how Mr. Quadri is shaping the innovation landscape at a major independent system operator. And by the way, MISO stands for the Midcontinent Independent System Operator. Amir, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be a blast. Appreciate it.
I'm excited. Let me share some key exciting highlights about MISO to get the dialogue started. MISO manages about a third of the United States bulk electric system. About 50, and they're spread across 15 states. They serve over 45 million customers, and they have about 1,000 employees across their 3 corporate offices in North, Central, and South. As a non-for-profit organization, it is owned by its members, which is composed by about 54 transmission owners and 143 non-transmission owners. And as we dive into the topics of analytics and data, they have deployed several cool automation capabilities or pilots, including digital twins, voice-to-text control rooms, robotic process automation, among others. And today, we'll dive into these and more. We will get started with a little bit of an understanding of our guest, Mr. Quadri, and his reflections on why he has chosen to build his career at MISO, and also what makes this a place that he can call home.
For sure. Looking forward to it. So I'm Amir Quadri. I've been at MISO for about 10 years now. I started out at NIPSCO, Northern Indiana Public Service Company. That was in 2011, I think. It's been a while. I started off as an intern in the control room there, and I was just drawn to the energy industry from a youth. And to just make it even more corny, it was 2008 where the first Iron Man movie came out, and I was watching that movie, and something in there just galvanized me to just be like, I really want to do this. Like, there's no other passion for me than just being in energy. Even though it was a science fiction movie, superheroes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there was something that caught me about the arc reactor. And I'm like, what if that could be real? And that's what's really drawn me to the power industry and just kept me involved in it. It's allowed me to transition from being a intern in the control room to an outage coordination engineer, and then to a shift engineer, and then now I'm in R&D looking at the future of what technologies could come to the organization or the industry and see how they could be used to push it forward. So that's kind of about me. I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Purdue University, and I'm married. I have a bunch of kids, so I got the bags under my eyes. That's about it right now.
That's cool. How do you feel we're making progress to get closer to the Iron Man reactor and your dreams of getting closer to the future?
I think we are on a pathway to it. Now, granted, arc reactors seem a little bit further off.
Okay.
However, I think the conversations that I am seeing and the enthusiasm I'm seeing from younger generations about different fuel types and getting into STEM actually encourages me to say that we might not have arc reactors, but we're going to have more sustainability and more reliability for our growing cities and central populations. So I think that's a great thing. Maybe in the future I'll have an arc reactor, maybe a super suit, who knows? But I got a 3D printer to play with and build things from there.
That's outstanding. And now you are in the research space, which is the arm of an organization that is really helping us look forward. So that's really exciting. You have positioned yourself to be on the leading edge of where we are as an industry, and you're in energy. So those two are already like good matches to what you always wanted to do.
Yeah.
What about your journey? You mentioned you have your bachelor's in engineering. What would you consider milestones in that journey to the point where you are today?
That's a good question. So I think some of my biggest milestones to where I was to where I am are both professional milestones and personal ones. Graduating from Purdue with an internship before graduating really and a job offer right afterwards was really amazing. Being able to stay close to my home in Northwest Indiana was awesome, but then I met my then girlfriend and now wife, who was studying dentistry in IUPUI. We made the decision, hey, let's just move down to Indianapolis. And I was at MISO. So that worked out really well because I was looking for an opportunity to learn more, do something different in the energy industry. So my initial experience was an intern at a transmission owner where they are operating the grid. They have people on the ground opening up switches, running generators, checking fuel, coordinating outages in real time. That's what the TO was doing in that control room at that time. So I had that experience there. Later on, kind of when my wife was graduating dental school, we thought, hey, where is a good job for a dentist? And do I want to stay in Northwest Indiana?
Yeah.
And we kind of made the decision, hey, let's see what Indianapolis has to offer. She was able to find a career, and I was able to find a career in planning. And that was a change for me, a milestone, because I learned a lot about myself in planning in 2014. It was a lot slower back then. And being exposed to the control room, I really enjoyed that go-go pace. Like something's happening, you have to react, or you have to figure out how to avoid the next issue. So I really enjoyed that. Going into planning, it was a lot slower. So you had to think about problems a lot longer. And to me, there wasn't that satisfaction of completing something. So then I moved into the control room again at MISO as a shift engineer. And at that time, I had thought I'll never work shift because it was 12-hour shifts, rotating schedules where you're working over midnight. But my coworker at the time convinced me to do it, and I was like, "You got it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna jump in." I stayed in the control room for about 6 years on shift, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing because you learn so much more about how TOs operate, transmission owners operate, how generation starts and stops occur, what interchange looks like, not at a micro level at a transmission owner, but you're now at the macro level where you're seeing everything happening across 15 states, 54 transmission owners, as you were stating. You're understanding how the market operates and what reliability means to that and vice versa. So I learned a lot while being on shift, being around those individuals. Then the pandemic happened and there was another milestone where I'm like, okay, I want to start a family. Pandemic's happening. I don't know what's going to happen if I'm going to stay on shift. I think I want to, try and see what's outside of the control room. And what was really great that happened was an opportunity opened up for the advisor role within R&D on the innovation team. And kind of my background with electrical engineering, being in the control room, and my hobbyist mentality of tinkering just kind of worked well to get into a technology advisory role where I get to tinker with new toys and products,
Yeah.
but then think, how could this be used to advance the organization future ready, better, do things differently, and train the next set of operators that come in to the control room for reliability and market operations. So that's just kind of how my career progressed. And now I'm here in Chicago talking to you after doing some presentations at UAI. So it's kind of like my career and my milestones throughout time.
Outstanding. I think you mentioned two key topics I would like to maybe double click on.
Yeah.
One is the topic of internships. The other one is the topic of you being in operations, then to planning, which is more associated with strategy, and then back to operations.
Yeah.
I think that there is something really important in
Yeah.
in your journey that could be beneficial here to our audience. Let's dive into the internship first.
Yeah.
And also I want to highlight this because even as I was in my own journey, I found that the value of internships are so incredibly powerful for any student, anyone that is aspiring to grow in their career.
Oh, yeah.
And it really opened my eyes to a whole different world outside of the textbook.
Yes.
And the exams and kind of the routine of performing well for the teacher.
Oh, yeah.
In school. I was kind of typically thinking I'm a good student, as long as I have A's, everything is good, good attendance, good boy, in the classes.
Yeah.
And I pushed that mentality all the way through college, but then I get hit with the reality of life.
Right.
And life for me was brought through the internship. I did 4 internships.
Wow.
Before I was eventually fully stationed in my full-time jobs.
Okay.
But if you could take a moment and kind of dive into what was it like for you, that internship experience, in a way to help advocate for the younger generations to go for it?
So before the internship, obviously I was in undergrad, but while I was in undergrad, I was also working at a company you guys might be familiar with. They are now no longer there. Not because of me. It's called Radio Shack.
Radio Shack. Everybody knows Radio Shack.
I know. The cool thing about Radio Shack is when I was like really, really young, like 9 or 10, I thought a dream job would be to work at Radio Shack because of all the parts drawers and all the cool tech.
Of course.
So I got a job at Radio Shack when I was like 17. And so I'd been working there throughout college and everything. And right before I got the internship, I was working at Radio Shack and I got the call for an internship at NIPSCO. And I was like, okay, cool, I could do this. I asked them, I'm like, right now, I want to do this internship. It sounds like a great opportunity, but I had to really advocate for myself and I was super nervous. And I didn't know how to ask it. And it sounds so silly now, but I'm like, I understand this is an internship, but I currently have a full-time job working at Radio Shack. Am I going to be able to balance this internship and my career at Radio Shack? And they're like, this is a paid internship. You can take this and don't worry about your job. And I'm like, oh, those exist? That changes everything.
Yeah.
And I think once I got off the phone with my hiring manager at that time, I felt like the weight of navigating a career just changed. It like dropped off, and now I'm like, I have to figure out what non-torn jeans I have, and I have to buy dress shirts. But getting the internship really just opened my eyes to the possibilities that just existed within an energy utility.
Yeah.
At a base level, you understand there's generators, there's linemen, there's crews. But until I had that internship, I didn't understand the minutia that there was on how a utility operated.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that there was a control room and then a backup control room and then, a main office. And then you had like 6 different IT teams, like 4 cybersecurity ones. Would never have dawned on me if it were not for that internship. But additionally, I was able to take what I learned from that internship and tell my friends, hey, don't be afraid to apply to any internship you see. Just do it and talk to them. and see what works.
From operations to planning back to operations. And of course, I know what you mean. I have worked in a market operations team buying and selling electricity in ERCOT.
Right.
And so I know that it's almost like, maybe we can describe it in terms of adrenaline.
Yes.
Because you see cause and effect, and we feed off the feedback that you get from the market, based on the decisions that you're making.
Yeah.
So if something, happened certain day, you did certain actions, they didn't quite work as you expected, and then you tweak, you adjust, you improve how you think about problems, and then you get better over time.
Exactly.
So you have this beautiful feedback loop in operations, whether it's in market operations or transmission operations or distribution operations. I love anything that is operations because you have that feedback and you have an opportunity to improve.
Right.
From a process perspective, that's dreamland.
Yes.
I would say, though, that your experience on the planning side gave you this other perspective that it's kind of missing when you're in operations, because when you're in operations, you're head down solving the problems of the moment. And here you get to define the future in planning. And so how do we best promote the development of that diverse knowledge, that diverse skill? I think actually you are 10 times better off because of that diversity of knowledge than if you were just in operations. And I love operations, but I would also like, for my engineers and my data analysts to have the perspective of both, because it also makes them better communicators.
Yes.
It also allows them to know how policy works, how executives work, how investments work.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Any additional comments on that journey?
So the transition from, operations to planning and then back to operations, it was around 2015, 2016, around that time. And at that time, I was in generation interconnections. And so we were dealing with queue reform. New independent power producers wanted to come online. We were helping them identify what it would look like to interconnect, what upgrades are needed for the network to allow that power to come onto the system.
Okay.
And so I was new to the planning realm, and I was reading a lot of material on how the queue works. And to me, it was just too slow. I personally like that satisfaction of going home at the end of the day and knowing my work is done.
Yeah.
And that I don't have to come back and, keep working on the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, there are people that enjoy doing that. And right now in my role today, that's what I do. But with planning at that time, it was a lot slower. It was a lot more, let's discuss this. Let's bring in stakeholders. Let's make sure we're doing this right. And to me, it was just like, I can't operate that way. I need to go faster.
I understand.
And so for me to go from planning, understanding what I knew there, I had a good understanding on how the planning process worked, what that meant for the future of operations as far as what lines would be coming into service, even though it's years out, what generation mix could look like, using that insight to understand better about what's happening today when I went back to operations was really instrumental. But it really just helped me stay within the control room, because while I was in the control room, I saw what congestion was occurring, but then I had the connections and planning to say, hey, what projects are coming down the pipeline that could help this in the future?
Yeah.
So they'd be like, yeah, there's a proposed plan for X, Y, and Z in this year. And I'm like, okay, so how long are we going to deal with this mitigation? And, oh, this mitigation might go away. So it was interesting to see that. But then I think after I left, the planning process and resource interconnection teams, they just went up. The amount of demand that they're getting now is insane. If you look at the MISO tariff, we take in all of the queue requests. So if an independent power producer wants to connect, they go through the queue, they pay a fee, and that goes to performing the study and the analysis. And there are you can open up the queue on the public website and see there's 900 to 1,000 requests in
Oh, wow.
for like this year.
Okay.
And it's trying to identify how can the organization assess each one of those and which ones don't pull out and which ones do go forward. So I'd say right now, if I were to go back into planning, it would be like that nose to the paper, getting things done type of demand.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more action oriented, which I did not anticipate. But I'd still go back to operations.
Yeah.
Because it's less meetings. So there's that.
Yeah,
But-
I get it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's kind of like an interesting topic to dive into because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, one side of my brain tells me you do want to expose your people to the strategic planning elements
Mm-hmm.
so that when they are, you know, with all of these adrenaline, you know, going on in operations, sometimes, you know, maybe we can compare these, you know, with the TikTok type videos, you know, they're
Yeah.
short. You get your brain has a way of getting the chemistry going to
Yeah.
keep you engaged and hooked.
Right.
Right.
The endorphins going.
Yeah, right. But then when you're watching a 3-hour video, so 3 hours is way too long of a video, right?
Right.
And that's how it feels in planning.
Yeah.
But that's also, you know, where the executives are regularly operating and your, you know, all of your executive team, right? And even you in your role, right? As you are now in the research and development, you're looking at the future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're planning for the future,
Mm-hmm.
which means that not always is like, okay, you have this idea and you can right now
Yes.
implement it, right?
Exactly.
Some things will have to wait a little bit. You probably found your sweet spot. You're in between
Yeah.
the 5 to 10 year to 20 year planning,
Yes.
right? And the daily, weekly kind of operations.
Exactly.
So good for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you.
Let me dive into key people in your life, key role models who have influenced your journey to this day. And the way I think of key role models, I have my own, many of them, is the people that are listening to us either are on the, let's say, more senior experience who could be those role models, or they could be those younger professionals looking to identify who their next role model could be. And so as we crystallize and define the qualities of the role models that have led you to be as successful as you are today, then people would gravitate towards those kind of people, and that helps provides the examples of the kinds of people that we want to work regularly.
Yeah. That is a loaded question for me.
Oh yeah, okay.
Because I have to think about that. It's always goofy, but when somebody asks me who is your role model, I always have to just kind of define what do I want to be in a role model for my own kids.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that, you know, I am a reliable person. I follow through what I say. I'm sincere when I say it. And you know, you pick up those characteristics from different people throughout everywhere. I think one of my biggest role models is actually my sister. She's 7 years older than me, so I'm not going to say how old she is, but she is older. She lives here in Chicago. She's got 2 wonderful teenage boys, or soon-to-be teenage boys. One's 9, one's going to be 14 in like 2 days. And she has been kind of one that exposes those role model characteristics and traits to me that I want to adopt. So she has the ability to see a situation as it's unfolding, and instead of being reactive to it, she allows it to happen, and then she decides what's the appropriate way to go forward with it. My manager right now, I sing his praises all the time to anybody who will listen, but he's the type of role model for me that I look up to when I face, you know, conflicts at work. Like, he's the person I could go to and say, hey, I need to vent. And his role is, I'm just going to listen. He's like, Amir's going to say something, whatever he's going to say, it's going to sound wild, but I'm going to listen to it.
Yeah.
When he's done, I'm going to ask him what he wants from me. And so I've taken that back and I've used it with other folks that I work with when they're dealing with, some struggles and concerns, and, they just need to be heard. That's what I've learned from those role models, is allow those people to talk it out, and then talk to them. Ask them to ask more questions. Tell them, tell me more, so you could understand, do you need to help, or do they need to vent, or do you need to connect them with someone that needs help? And I feel like I actually picked that up through the employee resource group work that I do through diversity and inclusion at MISO as well. It's just, you're not going to be able to solve everybody's problem. And I think that's like another thing about leadership is understanding you can't do it all, but allowing people to navigate their conflicts and being there to support them is something that I look up to. And I think that's really great when people expose that. The other thing, you said role models, and I'm thinking about the movie with role models with Paul Rudd in it. And they were like teaching two kids.
I don't remember that one.
I wouldn't recommend watching it. It's hilarious, but it's definitely like, it's an old movie, but it was hilarious. Pre-Ant-Man days.
Well, if that's how you're going to bat a loaded question, I think I should keep bringing loaded questions here, because that was phenomenal.
If you need to.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Let's dive into what I call the two sides of a coin. Mm-hmm. The great things and the greater things. The great things, let's go there first. The great things are, areas where innovation and, the time and effort that you or your team have put into an idea has flourished, either as good or better than you anticipated. You call them big successes for you and your team. And then we'll dive into the greater things, which is the lessons, because, hey, we found that we did this and it didn't quite work as expected. Mm-hmm. We will dive into that next. So let's go to the success stories, and here you can share examples of the technologies or the things that your team is working on.
So one of the things that we worked on, one of the things that my team works on, is we develop tech scouts. And those are just technology scouts on technologies that exist outside of our organization that are new to industries. We try to understand how they're used in different use cases. And then we think, what would that look like internal to our organization? That is, to me, the jump point for innovation at any organization. If you're going to be hanging around on Thursday, I'm going to be presenting on this, and like how to move innovation through at large scale organizations or small. But I think the key thing to do is, if you're the person tasked with it, research it up and down, in and out. Get familiar with it. When there is nothing to talk about with somebody else in the room, start talking about what you researched, because you want that excitement. And so what we do at our company, at MISO, is my team does research. We look at those technologies, assess what does it look like internally? Does it make sense for us to move forward on it, or should we just abandon it? So one of the things I spoke about before was how our IT organization was using the term digital twins to mean a redundant backup for something. They're like, oh, we have the server digital twin, so we could use that and we're good to go if it fails. And there was that nomenclature discrepancy, which didn't actually mean the correct thing. What they meant is they had a redundant system with stale data on it. When you're talking about a digital twin itself, you are making real-time decisions off of the information in it. Those decisions are actionable, and that model is kept up to date. Also, it's a replica of something that's a physical system that exists. So when we shared that with IT folks, they're like, okay, that makes sense, but what does that look like? And I kind of took them on a control room tour, and I'm like, hey, this giant wallboard we have is the energy management system. And all of these lines on here that are different colors are are digital representations of the physical transmission system. So what we're seeing is the actual flows on these transmission lines, and we can make decisions on opening up breakers, changing up the flows, changing generation in real time. And this is a digital twin of the physical model. So that allowed our IT teams and leadership to rethink how they used it. They fully stopped using the term digital twins. And they're like, yeah, this is all redundant. We are not doing any digital twins. But then they thought, what if we wanted to make a digital twin? What would that look like? Well, we shared with them, hey, there's various vendors you could work with that do that. What were you guys thinking about creating a digital twin for? And they're like, servers, just to see what is active, what isn't active, and what happens if we disconnect one. I'm like, that's a great use case. That is what a digital twin would be beneficial for in an IT organization. So go forward if you need to. So at this time, they have the paper, they have the documentation, they have the education to make an informed decision whether they want to make that investment or not. They've decided we don't need to right now, but we know who the big players are because of the Tech Scout. We've identified who the big players are, where the vendors are, and who's going to work with us. So IT is ready to go forward with that information as they need to. So that's one of the great things about doing types of research like that. The way it builds even further is when we're able to demonstrate what the technology capability is. So the one I like to go back to is where we did a Tech Scout around voice-to-text technology, because we saw that law enforcement was using it, and we're like, that's really regulated. They're using it in cars, they're using it at their stations, and they're saying, hey, per X, Y, and Z did this, and it gets logged. And we're like, that's how confidential. It's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Then we found from talking to some of like the chief information officers around us in Indianapolis that those in healthcare, they're using voice to text as well. And we're like, okay, there's HIPAA stuff. That's really confidential information. There's personal information identification. You don't want to get that out, but they're using it. So could we do that here? So we wrote a report around it, explained out what voice to text was, identified the big players. We found out that one of the big players is, moving to be part of the Microsoft shop, and we were a Microsoft shop too.
Okay.
And we're like, okay, this could work. So after doing the research, we created a pitch to leadership, to executive leadership that could squash any idea. And we said, we want to pilot something within the control room around voice to text. Really small. We only want like a handful of participants, and we want this to run for about 6 weeks. And we worked with their executive leadership in the control room, and they were actually on board with it. They're like, yes, we see the need for this because it's going to help our operators create documentation faster on logging events, on events in the system. We're going to be able to send out communications to our stakeholders and our transmission owners more quickly, and there's going to be less downtime for having people of different skill sets typing out messages. And that was a big seller for folks in the control room. Because if you look at a control room now, you have different seniority levels of folks that are in there. You have people that are fresh out of college in their 20s that are coming in. They're used to having, Siri, Alexa, Google on their phones and watches, and they're able to get their message out immediately. You have folks in my generation that are kind of like, I'm still good with a keyboard, and texting people is fine. I don't need to use voice assistants. That's okay. And then you have the more seasoned individuals that believe that their fingers are like birds pecking at a keyboard going like this. So when we actually rolled out the pilot, it was interesting to see that initially the operators were kind of scared of it. We had some early adopters, the younger folks, people in the mid-generation that were like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to use this every day.
Now, just to make sure that I understand the implications of these, the operator typically would have to, when there is, let's say, an event, an outage, they click on the outage, and there is a field for comments, and they add their comments for that event.
Yeah.
And the technology you're describing is one where they say, yes, this event, and they hit the button and they start talking.
Yeah.
And then whatever is their reactions of that event, will be now in text.
Yeah.
Encapsulated within that event.
Correct.
Okay.
And the big selling point of that, not selling point, I think, but the biggest benefit to all of that is the amount of time it takes to type something out is larger than it is just to say it. and get it captured digitally.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, we are now able to capture better information, more detailed information about an event that took place
Yeah.
straight from the operator's brain right into text. We don't have to worry about them rewording it or just putting in like yes or no answers,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
vague. We now have a robust record of what happened. So if we need to go back in time and understand why this decision was made
Yeah.
or what was the outcome, we have a clear picture that's painted for us.
That's beautiful.
And it's made a difference. And I'm so proud of the way that the operators used it during the pilot, that we kind of gave them the guidelines, like use this as you see fit. Use it to create emails, use it to search the web. If you want it to send Teams messages to your coworkers, feel free to do it. But we didn't set up any guardrails, and it was cool for me because I knew some of the operators. I knew some of them were giant tech nerds like me. Other ones were just going to use it for the bare minimum. The ones that were giant tech nerds, they were taking it to the next level. They were using it to have it voice command auto scripts for running stuff, opening up windows quicker. One of them set it up so it's like they hit the button, they're like, wake up. The system would wake up and open up all the windows they needed to use to operate that day.
Mm.
And so they were like, we were able to cut down 5 to 10 minutes of starting my shift by just saying that, and I'm able to grab a coffee and everything's going. And they're like, it's changed the way they operate, so they feel happy about it. There was the one point where during the pilot, it was in December, and I think ERCOT was impacted by this too. I think it was this December 10th freeze event, deep freeze event, where temperatures, at least in this region, got down to like -10.
Yeah.
And it was bad. I think out in ERCOT, there were generation start stalls where they couldn't get resources online. But at that time, our shift manager in the control room, who kind of oversees everything that's going on during that 12-hour period, he was putting out a message to all the stakeholders and transmission owners like, hey, we're going to go into conservative operations. Within the first 5 seconds of like typing it out, he's like, this is dumb. I'm just going to use my voice and I'm going to get this over and done with. Sent out the blast message, sent it to all the transmission owners and operators, and he's like, this was easier. I got to send that message and I was able to pay attention to something else now.
Mm.
And it's, to me, it's so encouraging that we had various operators using it within the pilot that were excited about it.
Yeah.
But then post-pilot, I had those more seasoned senior operators coming to me and they're like, I want to be in the next pilot you do because this is changing how we do work and it's making it easier. They're like, I could do and focus on more important things on the grid than typing out a message or scribbling down a note from a phone call. They're like, this makes it easier and we need more of this type of innovation. And it's great hearing it from the operators that are doing it because I feel like I'm delivering to the customer directly and just hearing and knowing their stories because I've experienced it too. I'm like, yeah, this is meeting what they needed. And so that's like the cool part of running pilots and proof of concepts because it informs then what does future investment look like at the organization. I mean, we do a pilot for maybe a couple thousand, but then the investment in the future is way more. Doing that pilot could tell them, hey, does that make sense to make that investment? Yes.
Yeah.
Then let's start scheduling for it. Let's start planning for it in our 5-year plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've seen things like that happen, and I feel like it's always encouraging to have those successes and those big wins, because it's like, okay, the next one that comes, we're gonna know what lessons learned from that one to avoid in this next one that we go forward on. And so I always find it amazing to work with innovation and in the control room.
I mean, you have tackled maybe one of the most challenging elements of innovation, which is adoption and the human in the loop component of it. It's always the hardest, is to bring people into the mix, technology for technology's sake, integrating the technology, these tables load in here, synchronize scheduling. That's actually quite simple.
Yeah.
But convincing people to trust, in certain process that was never there before, and they have already trusted their own little process, right? That is huge.
Yeah.
And you have succeeded in doing that, not with one, but several people, and not just, inconsequential decisions. These are, operators where every minute of their time matters a lot.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I think that, we don't give enough credit to operators and their time management and the impact that is, within reach of their hands, in the control room.
Absolutely.
And so any efficiency, anything that would make them, more operating a more seamless operation, it will result in real, quantitative impact
Yes.
for the customer. That's huge. And I would say that not only, you are enhancing the operation, but I may argue that nowadays when we have generative AI, which feeds of contextual information, you are allowing your operators to feed the information in a way that is more natural for the future improvement of data quality. Because whereas in the past, we may have, check boxes, yes, no, or typing just a few words that they had to, select very few words because that's all they had time for.
Yeah.
Now they have the same amount of time, but they can get a lot more words that provide a richer, perspective of that context. So I would argue that you guys are headed into a very, into a promised land of data for this particular industry.
Yes, we definitely are. I think I just want to say that the pilot we did with the voice to text in the control room, there was no generative AI at all included in that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Full transparent. It is a software that anybody could pick up. It's been around for like 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
I've used it. It's Dragon, so you can look that up.
Okay.
So that software, it doesn't use the way we used it was non-generative AI.
Yeah, right,
at
right.
all. So it was just the operator speaking into it.
Oh, I get it. It is the voice to text.
Yes, but when you bring up generative AI, I think it's really interesting because there are organizations that, want to ultimately bring generative AI into their four walls and see how it operates and see what it does. And there's folks that are like, we should do that from day one. And I kind of cringe at that. And I remember that at least from my experience in a utility and the utility industry, specifically energy, we are slow as molasses to move on anything brand new.
Yeah.
We will take our time because we want to make sure the bugs are out of it.
Yeah.
And if there are bugs in it, that could mean we experience blackouts.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know about anybody else, but I don't like being without my Wi-Fi or my internet because then my kids are bothering me to watch Cocomelon. And I don't play that. So we are very risk adverse, but that's why it is crucial, I believe, that utility organizations, power organizations have teams that could do quick prototypes to walk people back from the ledge of saying, this is going in production and it's going to change everything. It's like, no.
Yeah.
We're just seeing what this could look like initially. And if it doesn't make sense, we're going to walk away from it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how organizations could approach AI in the future, generative, whatever they want. It's just dip your toe in a little bit, assess it, make your decision over time. Don't jump in immediately because you don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Now, if you do it on an individual basis, like you as a person outside of your organization doing it with your own data, feel free to do it. That's your call. But I think it's like organizations have to really evaluate how they want that data to be used, who's going to be using it, what implication could it have. You're going to want to definitely keep the human in the loop for the near term if you are doing that. But I mean, like with anything you put into ChatGPT or, Gemini, whatever it spits out, you're going to want to verify. Just like if you see anything on the news, you want to see what they say, but then check the sources, verify. Does this make sense or does it not?
Yeah.
Also, if you use coding from Gemini or ChatGPT. Never push it to production, ever,
Right.
because that's how you get into trouble. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely roadblocks there, or road guards that need to be implemented. But by each organization, they can do that and identify what those guardrails are through proof of concepts and pilots,
Yeah.
and having people do research. Do your homework. It makes that conversation that much easier to leadership to say, yes, we should invest, or no, we shouldn't invest, but here's a different solution that could help us get to where we want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. About how many technologies would you say your technology scouts are evaluating on any given year?
Oh, so we are a small team. There's about 5 of us, I think. No, there's 4 of us. There's 4 of us, and we try to do at least 12 a year total.
Okay.
And
That's a lot.
it's doing those technical technology scouts, but it's also running pilots, proof of concepts, and prototypes simultaneously. So right now, I think I wrapped up a larger tech scout that was in partnership with NERC, North American Electric Regulatory Council,
Yeah. Yeah.
about the uses of AI within real-time operations. So you could actually grab that off their website
Nice.
now.
Outstanding.
And so that was one of the research papers I contributed on. So that was my research for the year. But now I'm running 2 brand new pilots going forward that I can't really talk about right now because we're just starting them up. But typically that's how it goes for the team. We have 12 for the year to inform the organization about what's potentially coming. And then from those tech scouts, they might evolve into running a proof of concept pilot or something else that could, demonstrate what this is for the organization.
Yeah.
And it helps leadership decide, do we want to invest in it? One, what is the right place to do it? And then when do we want to do it?
Right.
And that also helps us bring in additional teams. So it'll allow us to bring in our data team to see, hey, what are they working on? How could this inform what they want to do in the future? We talk to our security friends in cybersecurity and to really understand what are they worried about with this technology, or could this technology actually help them out with what they do? Could it increase our security profile? And we bring in our supply management folks because back office folks typically don't get a lot of love.
Yeah.
And so we like to bring them in early and be like, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. What are you guys worried about? How could this impact you? And you guys might actually have a use case for us. And that gets back office people on our side as well. And it's weird not weird, but it's fortuitous that these connections we have in the innovation team, you're not just working with the core business, you're working with the enterprise business. So you learn organizational empathy to say, this team is really struggling and that's why they can't move fast enough. But is there a technology that I could share with them that could help them? Because if it does, they could be doing all this other stuff that they want to do.
Yeah.
So part of the innovation team is like showing what innovation could enable for other teams.
Yeah.
Not just reliability, not just markets, but your back office, finance, legal, those folks. Because they want to push the grid forward too. It's just, how can they?
Right.
And so innovation teams allow them to know what they can do and how they could do that going forward.
I wonder, what advice would you give? I'm trying to kind of normalize your experience across the industry. Of course, MISO, it's quite a decent sized organization. Even though, I mean, from the number of customers impacted, number of transmission owners that you serve, from an employee perspective, it's not super big, right? It's 1,000 employees. So that we need to keep that in mind. However, you have about a 4-people team in innovation and research. I would imagine that for utilities that have lesser, let's say, relatively lesser number of employees, let's say the 500 or the 300, at some point you cannot afford to have a dedicated research team or innovation team. What tips or advice would you provide to, let's say, a smaller organization that doesn't yet have an innovation team or a team that is dedicated for research, but you still want them, you would want them to try new things, to experiment some things?
I love that question because it is, it goes back to just starting with a question. Uh, if there's a new technology out there, before saying, I want to research this, ask a question about how you can make it into a research topic to benefit the organization. Anyone can do that as an individual wherever you are at the organization. If you ask the question how this could help us, do your research into it. As you're doing research, pull in people that are close to the problem and have them explain the problem more so. Document everything you can with it and be able to tell that story and link it to your potential solution. Because then you need to start doing kind of like a organic roadshow. Yes, it's going to be boring. Yes, you're going to be repeating the same thing over and over again. But every time you talk about it to someone new, they're going to go talk to someone new in your smaller organization. And it's going to grow and it's going to spread and people will want to learn more about it. So if you're at that smaller organization, people might come to you and say, okay, I heard about this idea. How do we get it off the ground? What should we do? The next thing is to think about, can I run this as a pilot? Do I have to spend a lot of money for it? Is there budget for it? Where can I get budget? And I think as you've been doing your research and socializing it with your peers, you might find a leadership person that has budget available to say, yeah, we could experiment with this and see what it could look like. Or you might be able to talk to someone that is very computer savvy and understands, hey, I could code this and we know how to make it run. I think that's critical is doing your research, running proof of concepts and pilots, just seeing how it could look. Do it in a low secure environment where you don't have to worry about data getting out or getting bad. Use public information if you want to. That's even better, so it's safe. We've used FERC dockets to test out some algorithms, and it's like, yeah, it's publicly available information. We're not going to harm anybody. Try it that way. And then the last thing I would suggest for folks that want to try innovation at their own places, even though it's hard, document everything that happened. Document it all. Every decision point you made, every hurdle you came over, every pivot point, every success you had. Be able to talk to all of it because you're painting the story about the journey of your automation or the journey of your experience. That way you get more people to understand what was the great thing about it, what was so hard about it, and does it have to be hard again in the future? Because if leadership is listening to how hard it is, they should be able to remove those roadblocks for those individuals to allow them to innovate. They should be able to see like they're trying to make this company better. They're trying to make us more efficient. Let's let them do that through these smaller pilots and proof of concepts because they'll inform the future investment. I mean, small companies could do it now. Yes, it's going to be a one-person thing. Yes, it'll be a slog. But with diligence and just taking the time to do it, you could change a lot of minds quickly, or it could be slowly, dependent if you could get the face time with them.
Are you saying that this is not just the job of a data scientist who knows, how data technologies work? This is not just for the IT geek.
Not just for the IT geek. I mean, I am not an IT geek in any way, shape, or form. I like to think I'm a geek, but no, I like far from it. I'm an electrical engineer. I know how to make like home automation stuff and like tinker around with things. But
from listening to what you're saying, though, I think that the key quality is leadership, though.
It's leadership, but it's being passionate about it and wanting to see it through. And I think if you are the type of person that sees a new technology and immediately can envision how it could help you, take that and research it. Use that momentum you have to start changing the way people think about what they're doing right now. See how they could pivot and encourage them to think along with you. I highly suggest don't say it's this way or no way, but just ask questions because people get scared of new technology at all times. I mean, when electric cars came out, people are like, oh, those are going to blow up all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, They do catch fire, yes, but if you recall with the first internal combustion engines, those blew up too. But they've been around now for 100 years, and we trust them pretty well.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with EVs, the same thing with any new technology. You're going to have early adopters. They're going to be ones that are going to be championing it. You're going to have people that are going to be right behind them that are like, okay, we've seen where the issues are, but we think it's more adoptable. And then you're going to have naysayers that are just status quo. Find your sweet spot, and I'd say be in that middle group that's seen the advancements, but then can communicate to the naysayers.
Yeah.
And those naysayers, changing them to say yes, it's about connecting to them, understanding their problems, and then just saying, we want to work with you and bring you along on this journey so you learn as well. Because you want to make them empowered to make that decision, or empowered to understand how that technology is going to work. Yeah. And I think that's the fun part of it, but it's also kind of the slow part. But again, it's you are trying to change a person's mindset, and that's hard. It's way harder than changing an operating system.
Yeah. It's
getting to understand them and just connecting. So I think there's a lot of joy in that, and I think that's why innovation is just it's a fun, amusing, amazing thing to do, because the challenges are always different and you're just kind of kept on your toes. So that's my advice to folks that want to do this at their organization that don't have innovation teams. Start off grassroots, do your research, document, and identify your proof of concepts. Those use cases, make sure they're not really, really hard. Because if it's a super big use case that's really impactful to the business, but you fail on it, you're going to lose trust. You want to avoid that. Don't do something that's super simple of a use case that's like could be automated, in one day. Do something that's kind of hard but kind of easy that you could get a win from, that you could use to champion through the organization and say, hey, look at the benefit that this had. This is the investment we had into it, and overall it was good. How do we work this into a future plan? And I think that's going to be the sweet spot for people that want to do innovation like that.
Outstanding. Mm-hmm. I find it so fascinating that for someone that likes the adrenaline of working in operations, you do appreciate working with people and bringing people along. And that's not always a topic that goes very fast.
It goes back to the Radio Shack days. Teaching people how to use cell phones and stuff. I got used to it to a degree.
You see, do an internship.
Yeah.
Even if it means, Radio Shack is no longer there. By the way, there might be some Radio Shack stores still open, no?
I think there's some franchises. I think there was one in Stranger Things in the Underworld or whatever it's called. The Upside Down World. If you watch that show, there's a Radio Shack reference.
Let's dive into one of our. We're getting closer towards the end of our interview here. Let's dive into the greater things. If you could, I know you may not be able to reveal all of the vulnerabilities there, because we're talking about an independent system operator. Mm-hmm. But to the extent that you can share without compromising any security boundaries there, what can you share with us that other utilities don't feel that, they can do this and they have those many successes because they have a lot of money to invest in these sort of things, mm-hmm. but that's not us. But I find that people connect when they see the areas where you're still struggling with and that you haven't quite, conquered. Can you share some of those with us?
So to begin with, MISO does not own any physical transmission or generation equipment at all. We own nothing. Everything is member owned by the utilities. They bid in their assets into the market, and we run the market for the energy market. MISO takes no profit from that. That all goes back to the stakeholders and market participants. So when we look at how our technologies are different than utilities, we are looking specifically at like data, how we're using it, why we're using it, how are our stakeholders using it, what are they willing to share with us, what are they not willing to share with us, and that is where we're learning a lot of those greater things. Big data has been a topic for while now, and it still is. I feel like in the future, organizations want to be able to share their data securely and not enable bad actors to see what it looks like. So some of the stuff we're pondering about is in use by in healthcare right now, and it's around data anonymization. So they use it for patient data, sharing it through cloud services, and what that looks like. And so that's stuff that we're considering too, because we have stakeholders that go to various stakeholder meetings and they have questions about the data and they're like, hey, we want to see this. Per our tariff and through our legal requirements that are publicly seen, we're not allowed to share sensitive information about our stakeholders unless each one of them sign off. And trying to get all of them to sign off will be like pulling teeth. I don't know how long it's going to take, but that's not going to be something the organization wants to go down. So that's why we're looking at data anonymization now and what that could mean to the organization and how could that inform us about being a better transparent partner to our stakeholders and the industry. Because there's folks that just want to understand better how we operate. That's one opportunity that we could do. Other stuff that we're doing is working with our university partners to see what insights they're coming up with when it comes to AI and machine learning. We're able to share, historical, fictitious data with them. They're able to apply algorithms to it and kind of give us new insights on what load shapes look like and really confirm some of the hypotheses we had. And I think the one that really stuck out to me is work we did, I'd say back in 2020 to 2021. That was like peak pandemic, and people were seeing like load changes throughout the entire footprint, not just MISO, but throughout the United States at other countries and stuff. And they're like, what's happening? Why is load getting distributed so differently? And it dawned on everybody, it's like people are working remote, and that's where we need more generation. And then you started looking at the load curves and the load profiles. It's like, we needed better data. We needed to know how we could get this information quicker. So now I think there is a renewed industry curiosity into synchrophasers and how those could inform real-time operations, but also planning too. And so those are kind of the greater things I see coming on the horizon, but then how like AI is going to help advance that. So like it's also informing folks, the greater things are informing folks the difference between like an automation technique versus AI. What can you throw at AI and machine learning? And it's reminding folks automation is process driven. AI and ML is, data driven. You have to have a lot of data for that to work. And so it's informing folks and explaining that out just to bring them up to speed and then letting them think about how they could use it for their own use cases. And yes, it sounds boring, but that's like kind of the greater part of my job. It's seeing people's light bulbs turn on in their heads and saying, oh, I get that now. I could see how this works. And I think that's amazing what we do at MISO, but I feel like folks can take that and use it at their own organization too. And it's just giving them the information, allowing them to think, and then working with them to solve their own problems. People love that too.
And what in that has not, let's say, worked so well? What have you tried that other people may want to avoid because you have already tried it and it didn't quite work?
So for MISO and for utilities, it's different. For our organization during that pandemic, we tried virtual reality. We don't really know how that's going to work appropriately for an organization that doesn't have physical assets. On the flip side, there are member utilities that are using VR for plant inspections, for training operators on and technicians on how to work within a power plant, which that's amazing to see. Now, we weren't able to move that forward at MISO, but we don't have the real type of use case that would make sense for us to do it with.
Yeah.
Kind of fell apart, but that was a lesson learned for us to know, well, does this really help us move the business forward? Is this going to change how our operators operate in, a turbine? No, because we don't own any physical equipment, so it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it's changed the way we didn't really go forward on that pilot or proof of concept. We did the research. Sure, it's really cool, awesome technology. We just didn't get to play around with it or use it. With that being said, I was able to convince my team and my leadership to go to Sandbox VR in downtown Indianapolis, and we played the Star Trek adventure game. And that was really cool. So we got our VR fill in that realm. That was awesome.
Check.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I've showed you guys what it could look like. We had the haptic suits, so if you got shot by a Klingon, you felt it. It was still fun, but there's things that work for the energy industry, depending on where you are, and things that don't. So assess your industry, assess your companies, and bring ideas that make sense. So
Hey, maybe you will get to be your own Iron Man.
I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping for that one day.
Okay, let's talk about the future. What's the future? What is your vision for the future? For independent system operators, and or maybe the vision of the future for the utility members that you serve.
I think on both aspects, it's going to be data hungry and data driven. With the advances in cloud technologies that are coming, the organizations move and shift from physical servers and data centers to cloud. It's going to enable them to share data freely across their organization and enterprise so they can make new innovations that they didn't think about that were possible. I think it was 2 years ago, we had 2 interns. One was on a customer service side and one was on a planning side. And they were just sitting next to each other talking because they'd gotten coffee. They wanted to hang out. But they were looking at overlays of customer experience data versus planning. And they decided, hey, what does it look like if we merge the data? What type of insights could we see? And what they saw was just kind of like whenever there was a customer complaint, there was something that happened within the planning side. And they saw the correlation and they're like, oh, this is really cool. Granted, we knew that, but the thing that they saw for the first time was like, wow, we're now seeing this and this makes sense to us. And they were excited about it.
Yeah.
The better thing that I liked was that there wasn't somebody that was senior to them coming to them and say, yeah, we knew that. That's old news. They're like, that's really cool. What do you think about it? Tell me more. Tell me how this could inform us differently. And so the interns got really excited about that. And so they dug more into the data and they got really more excited. And what ended up happening was after their internship ended, they came back again for another internship. They had other internships available, but they're like, no, the experience I had at MISO was great.
Wow.
And the fact is that they're data scientists. And I feel like having great experiences and touch points with new data scientists, data engineers, analytics engineers, a whole plethora of them coming in, we're going to need them at any and every organization to look at those insights, interpret what the data is saying to people that don't have that ability to interpret it, to change numbers to words. And I feel like those individuals can do it, and they could help shift organizations faster than they anticipated if they're given the tool sets and the ability to speak it out. And I feel like to those data scientists and data engineers that are coming out of school, advocate for yourself. It's going to be scary. It's going to be hard. You land an internship, advocate yourself, and fail there, you'll be okay. If you do it in the real world, advocate yourself, but do it as carefully as you can. But you need to do that. You need to share the story of the data to help make those data-driven decisions. Because every company wants to do that. They want to get more streamlined. They want to get more agile. They want to, increase their profits. And luckily, I'm at an organization that's like, hey, we're not for profit. We just want to know how we could help the customer do better. I think it's important that we have data folks that are aligned with those missions. And I think the better organizations could explain that out to their data scientists, and the more data science they could bring on, the better suited they're going to be able to do that for the next workforce. There's still going to be need to have traditional, electrical engineers, system engineers, things of that nature. They're always going to be needed, I see. But we're going to need more folks that can process data and explain it out, so those engineers could design systems around them and push it forward. So there's always going to be the need, and it's changing now, and it's always going to be an ever-changing trend. So be ready for it. Things change every 5 to 10 years. You have folks that are retiring out from whatever position they had before, and that position changes to something different. So if you could stay informed on the new data trends, that's always going to keep you on the cutting edge.
Outstanding. So instead of becoming irritated, as an employee by the questions or by the new technologies and the changes that are happening, is how do we turn that, let's say, energy into the energy of curiosity, and how to navigate, the future that we have ahead, because it's gonna, everybody's job will in one way or another be impacted, and the question is, how do we play together? And I really appreciate your comment about the manager not putting down the two interns, because I have been that manager, in the past, and it only takes, one bad experience for someone to get discouraged and not to continue, their journey in that. And maybe they say, okay, maybe I'm not good in this area. Let me try something else. And so I appreciate you saying that, because over time I have learned better, right? And we really need each other.
Yes.
And we need to lift each other up as opposed to beating people down. And that's a good example of how to do that. What question would you like to pose for the next person that I interview?
Oh, geez. What was the question that I had from the last person?
So the previous person I interviewed, John Koshavar, CIO of Portland General Electric, he put this question out there. What question would you tell yourself of the challenges that you experience, that you have ahead? And the background to that is that we all tell stories to ourselves about who we are and where we are. We're either the victim of the challenge, or we are someone who has an opportunity to make something out of it. But whether we like it or not, we are all, telling ourselves a story of who you are in the ecosystem, of players and the stakeholders involved, and you're in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
And so that is the question. What is the story that you tell yourself in the most difficult challenges that you experience?
So the story I tell myself is based on a book I'm reading by Sol Rashidi. It's called AI Scrapes and Bruises. And so I saw her speak at AI4 in 2023 out in Vegas. And she was CIO of, I think, L'Oreal, Carnival Cruise Line. She worked on IBM Watson. She's brilliant. And I got to shake hands with her. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm never going to wash my hand. I did, though, because that's nasty. Anyways, I was reading her book, and there's just the way that she's able to get the idea across about how to move innovation, and being a rogue executive is what I put my mindset in when I'm working on these projects. And what that means in her book is you are going to make friends on this journey, you are going to have allies, and you're going to have adversaries for your project. But your task is, how do you identify which groups you need to work with and who do you need to pay attention to? And so for my projects, I've been leveraging that book to help me understand how to be that rogue executive. Granted, I'm not an executive, but that rogue leader to challenge the status quo and move things forward. And her 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 book kind of resonates with me because it's the idea of pushing technology where it's scary. And that's the story I tell myself. It's I am a rogue person trying to do this with a ragtag team of data scientists and engineers that want to move this forward, and we're a scrappy team that's going to do it. And we're like the underdog. So that's kind of what I say when I go into work is we have to change the hearts and minds, and we don't have a lot, but we're going to do it. And to me, it's just that there's something about that positive adversary, I'd like to say, positive conflict that makes me want to strive further and just say, yeah, we did this. It wasn't hard, but we did it. Look, we're going to go do this new thing now. And I feel like that's what really helps me tell the story every day to get me going. And I think Sol Rashidi's book really just helped explain and articulate that for me. So I'll send you the link afterwards.
Please
you can
do.
take a look
We
at
will
it.
include it in the description.
For sure.
Outstanding. Thank you. Now, what is the question that you have for the next podcast?
Yeah. Geez. It's kind of like not really a good question, but I've always been curious. Do you feel like we're closer to getting to Skynet or we're getting closer to The Matrix? Now, they're both sci-fi movies, and I've always kind of been curious as the advancement of AI goes on. Where do you think we're going to end up being at? Are we going to be with angry robots with us, and like in Terminator with Skynet? Or are we going to have angry robots that want to use us as batteries like in The Matrix? Or will it be like iRobot, where the robots are cool and they're following Asimov's, law of robotics? I don't know. And I'm just kind of curious. That's actually one of the conversation starters I have when I'm talking to a group of data scientists and engineers. It's like, so are we building Skynet yet? Or are we going to The Matrix? Like, what's happening? I'd kind of actually like to hear that from another person. It's a weird question, but if you think about how we assess AI today, there are people that are looking at Isaac Asimov's laws from iRobot, written in 1954, to explain how AI should work in the future and how it should operate within robotics. And I think it's that cool nexus point that we're at where sci-fi is coming to reality. So I guess, how ready are we to embrace science fiction as reality? Is the question.
Okay.
So
Okay.
It's a weird one.
We will have maybe a whole future podcast dedicated to this. I love the topic. I love to study psychology and I fascinating discussion. I will keep this as an open-ended question
For sure.
For the next speaker, and we'll see what we get. Amir, what a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for being here with us. Has been a delightful conversation. Best of luck to you in your endeavors at MISO, and all of your team and the company.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Hope we do this again and see you at the conference.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you for joining us today. Joining this discussion with Amir Quadri with MISO and the Midcontinent Independent System Operator. Thank you for joining, and you have a blessed day. Bye-bye.